Hello friends, today's lecture is devoted to Henry Fielding as an essayist in the 18th century. Most of us don't know that he was an essayist. We know him as a novelist, as a fiction writer, and a person who intervened in society very actively. But that he wrote essays is not known widely to people. And Professor Richa Bajaj, who delivers today's lecture, teaches English in the department at Hindu College in Delhi University, and she has a keen interest in the 18th and 19th century fictions, and today she is with us to talk about the potentialities and the actualities of Henry Fielding as an essayist. So far as I am concerned, I would like to say a few words before you are requested to speak, Professor Richa Bajaj. He was arguably, that is Henry Fielding, was arguably the first novelist. And his novels, Joseph Andrews and Tom Jones, they contain a large number of essays in them. So the moment she told me that today she will be specifically focusing on Fielding's essays, so what occurred to me was those essays which he wrote in the course of his two novels for which he is famous. And then I thought that, well, that essays actually make you a committed person. So I was wondering whether I should put this question to Professor Bajaj, that essay basically is an intellectual act, and it is interventionist in nature. You are telling the reader that this is what you think, and of course when you say that, and when you are in the hands of a person like Henry Fielding, then there will be more questions than answers. So with this short introduction, I request Professor Bajaj to begin her lecture, and we will be of course talking all the time. So Professor Bajaj, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you very much, Professor Prakash. Indeed, as you said, I would like to break that word that you said that essay makes you a committed person. Did you say that?
I meant that.
Meant
yes.
that. Now, of course, because you are committing to the page and you are committing your words to the page and not using the garb of character, you're not using the facade of fiction, rather using the mode of the essay, which is meant to convey an idea, right? And so when you're conveying an idea and you are committing yourself to the page, in that sense you are taking a position, you're taking a stance in favor of something and against something else. And I find 18th century, so let me clarify, today I will not be speaking of Henry Fielding as as a journalist or as an essayist who is writing political stuff. Rather, since this is a part of the larger framework of the English essay, and the English essay, as we've discussed earlier, had a more humorous, light vein. So I will be taking up for discussion the essays which form the periodical essays, which are a part of the Covent Garden Journal that he brought out from 1752 onwards. So I'm not looking at the essays that figure in his early career when he wrote for instance, the Jacobites Journal. He had edited several weekly papers even earlier before he went on to start this journal, the Covent Garden Journal. And the other journal that he worked on was the True Patriot. Both these journals, the True Patriot and the Jacobites Journal, they were political and historical in nature. The True Patriot in fact had the subtitle "The History of Our Own Times." Right. So in that sense, those journals were more political, and in that sense, they were meant to be. They had a purpose, right? They had a purpose, and Fielding too had a purpose. In fact, so much so that when, after having written for these journals, he was supporting the cause of the Church of England. In the era of the Jacobite rebellion of 1745, and because he was supporting England and the Church of England, and in fact taking a dig at the Jacobite rebellion, and in the Jacobite Journal, he in fact was then given, because of his pro-government stance, he was actually appointed justice, and which was a magistrate for Westminster and Middlesex. So in that sense, by 1748, the rebellion was in 1745, and by 1748 he had been appointed the Justice of Peace, which means he had to just take care of these small matters in court, and he was the court magistrate deciding, trying to make the area crime-free space. So what I'm trying to say here is that Henry Fielding is known as a novelist, and as an essayist also, less as an essayist, more as a novelist and a playwright, to be honest. But even within his essay writing career, there are two kinds of essays that he has written. One kind belongs to the category of purposeful, you could also call them propaganda to some extent, propagandist, purposeful, political, historical sort of essays, where he's taking up a position and he's fighting for it, and he's attacking certain opponents, etc. He's doing that. And then there is this second category which we are taking up, which is the Covent Garden Journal that he wrote much later in his life. In fact, the journal came out in 1752, and by 1754 he had passed away. So just these 2 years, the last 2 years of his life really were devoted to this kind of journal. Now, I find the Covent Garden Journal also very interesting from the point of view that Fielding is more moderate. He's not caustic, he's not acerbic, he's not satirical to the extent that you would feel that, how 18th century literature is written, how he wrote his earlier, for instance, journalistic pieces. So here he is humorous and talking about the problems of the age without necessarily forcing his opinion on the reader. So I think he is more moderate, and he's tempered his stance and is looking at the general nature of life in these essays. And we'll be discussing then at least two essays from the Covent Garden Journal for our discussion today. So as I said that and that is the first thing, as you said, committed to the page. Now the second point that you suggested here, that both Joseph Andrews and Tom Jones, Joseph Andrews was written in 1742 and Tom Jones in 1749. Both these novels carry essayist sort of, the mode is essayist, it carries a lot of these, in between you find that the writer has digressed and gone into an area of writing about certain morals or certain tastes or certain manners, and commenting on the age. So there are essays within these texts, right? And this is also the idea that one has to remember, that 18th century is largely the age of the essay, because no matter what genre you take, whether it is poetry, think of Pope and others, whether you think of poetry, you think of novel, or you find that all writers seem to be taking up the essay form in their writing, which meant that these writers felt the need to convey something. And even when Fielding projected a fictional world in Joseph Andrews or Tom Jones, even then he felt the need to break out of that mode of fiction and speak directly to the reader and state the purpose of his writing, or state, it's almost like, you are being entertained, but let me now give you a moral sort of a statement, right? Let me give you a wise way of looking at things. There'll be a statement, there's wisdom then which is nicely couched in fiction. Now the Covent Garden Journal, then the essays that are a part of the Covent Garden Journal come close to the essays that are there in both Joseph Andrews and Tom Jones. They are not like, in fact they are closer to this kind of a journalistic format which is there in both these novels than the kind of essays that he wrote for the Jacobite journal, for instance, or the True Patriot, because there he had a purpose and he was driving home a point. But both in the novels he takes the humorous turn. And let's remember that the essay, the English essay that we speak of, is really is something which is not meant to be journalistic. It is not meant to be propagandist. It is not meant to be didactic also, which means that you are looking at a form which is necessarily about just creating interest among the public, or just humorously dealing with certain topics, right? Here you are not dealing with something which is very serious subject. So the essay in itself, I think, the English essay itself is not meant to be a serious kind of a proposition, and which is why I said that, and this is something that Denis Gigante in his book The Great Age of the English Essay had noted. In fact, I'd like to quote from that particular bit, if we can have it on the screen. So he said that in his book The Great Age of the English Essay. He said that mixing personal reflections with social critique, the first British essayists from whom today's literary critics descend self-consciously sought to forge a literary tradition. Right? So basically, what I'm trying to say here is that the English essay is literary in nature. Unlike the other essays which are journalistic in nature or meant to be close to facts. So the English essay is not the journalistic type, it is not a historical account, it is not meant to be treated as fact. It is in fact part of a literary portrait. Right? It is supposed to be where personal reflections, the moment you say personal reflections are mixed with social critique, you have brought in a sense of the subjective, which means you have moved away from the factual world, the documented world, which the journalistic essay stands for. Right? So there is a lot of personal reflections and which are mixed with social critique, and this is what the British essay really stands from. And the writers are self-conscious and they are building a literary tradition. So it is a literary form in that sense. And the periodical essays then does not require any kind of specialized knowledge. It does not require any political or philosophical sort of base from the readers as well, or does not claim to be political or philosophical treatise, right, or a kind of a specialized subject. It is meant to be a general essay on life where the socio-political aspects are taken up for projection and seen from, very interesting, from the lens of the personal voice or the lenses of the characters who are involved in this, or the narrative voice of the writer. So which is why I said that when you said that there are, taking my point back to the first question that you asked, do you think that Joseph Andrews and Tom Jones both carry essays? Are there any comparisons to be drawn? I agree, yes, that while you have Fielding, who has written journalistic papers, right, he has published these papers and he's published novels, and then he's also published these English essays which were published in Covent Garden Journal. So there are three categories. I would say that the Covent Garden Journal, they come somewhere closer to the novels than they are to the essays that he has written. Does it make sense?
Well, a lot of sense, because the points you are making are well drawn out. I mean, you very clearly focus upon the distinctness of each point that you make, and you are more or less focusing upon the 1740s, when that's his literary career in the actual form, where he composes novels.
Right.
And there, he believes in entertaining the crowd, the readership. And I think aptly you have named that particular journal called Covent Garden.
Covent Garden.
So Covent Garden means that it's meant for the common masses and for their understanding, for their relaxation. When do you go to a garden? Only when you want to get away from the humdrum of life, and when you are not doing any focus on the social business of the period, when you want to relax. When you want to move around, stroll, and you start thinking in terms of liberty, and then you think of the essay, then you think of the novel. So novel is a literary form, it's an aesthetic form, as you rightly say, and it means to entertain in the best sense of the word, because that's what literature is. Literature is not pedagogical. As you rightly pointed out, it's not educational, it's not propagandist. It involves the reader, makes the reader a part of the understanding circle that is formed by the literary form. So he is doing so many things. So Dr. Bajaj, what do you feel about this particular period, this particular those 10 years, this decade in the 1740s, when he is at his height of talented effort, and there he is writing novel, he is writing a different kind of an essay. And is it something to also do with the 1740s, because that's his best period in life?
Yes, no, I agree there, and I'm glad that you brought out the point of the Covent Garden section. So the Covent Garden was a part of the Covent Garden in London. That section was at that time it was an entertainment spot, because one, it had on one hand it had that Covent Garden theatre, which was very famous. Now the Covent Garden Theatre was there. There were also taverns alongside. There were also coffee houses. There were brothels. So this place was a rabble mix of things. So this was a heady space that we are looking at, and he chooses that as the title of his journal, right? So the Covent Garden in London is supposed to be an area which is supposed to be like an entertainment hotspot, right, where you have all sorts of thrill available to you, whatever you might like. And this is visited not just by the rabble crowd, the rough people, but also by members of society, also artists. Right, so this is a place where artists, the genteel members, the rabble, they would come together, so to speak. It's almost like a circus. It's almost like a festive space. There is theatre, there are taverns, there is brothel, there's coffee house, artists, and all these people coming together. He chooses this as the title for his journal, which is called the Covent Garden Journal. Now, Covent Garden was also, this might help us. Now, you see, I told you earlier that he was appointed the magistrate, right? He was appointed the justice of peace, right? He had to maintain law and order. So he tried to make this a very dignified sort of a career, and what he did was he tried to get make this particular place very crime free. So which is why Fielding actually was this he was the first one who founded a metropolitan police force that were called these Bow Street Runners, and these people in 1749 they were meant to clear the area of criminals and cheats and all of those. So he actually installed this kind of a police force that was constantly clearing this area of criminals and cheats. So I think this in a way tells us that what is the purpose behind this journal that he's writing, that he begins in 1752, which was first bi-weekly and then weekly, and then because in the journal often it would be stated, and I quote, that all persons who shall for the future suffer by robbers, burglars, etc. are desired immediately to bring or send the best description they can of such robbers, etc., with the time, place and circumstance of the fact to Henry Fielding, Esquire, at his house in Bow Street. So
he's taking help from the burglars to work against other burglars.
No, but he's also putting it out in the journal that if you are, being stalked by these people, and if you're troubled by these robbers, then please reach out to to me, that is, and to my house, and make it known. So I think he had a genuine desire for bringing some sort of reform in society, and he had a genuine vision that he wanted to fulfill through the Covent Garden Journal, which was meant to be more like a cultural rather than a political forum. Now this is also something that needs to be outlined here, that that the English essay is not a political treatise, it is rather a cultural sort of a manuscript, if you like, or a cultural form, wherein you are trying to refine the culture of the people by using, just slight nudges here and there, without necessarily becoming overtly political or taking a party position or anything. So this is also the essence of the English journal, and which is why I had mentioned this earlier also, that I think the 18th century writers through the English essay were largely responsible in cultivating the taste of the people of England at the time, because they were showing them the direction as to what they must do in order to reform their manners, and what they must do to maintain a sense of dignity and integrity through a more like a satiric mode, but not necessarily coming from any political position from where it becomes very extreme or they might be shut out. Now, of course, we are saying that it's very light-hearted or anything, but that's hardly the case. Knowing Fielding for who he is, he actually begins a paper war of sorts, and this escalates into a kind of a fight among the readers and also the intellectuals of the time. So this Covent Garden Journal received a lot of flack from people from the Grub Street, but also received support from people. So it actually divided the reading public and also writers at the time into two very stark groups. So we'll discuss that when we come to that. But what I wanted to suggest here is that the Covent Garden Journal was meant to reform and was meant to highlight the decline of morals in the age using the satirical mode, and reminding people of how this kind of misuse or misrepresentation is leading to a kind of a complete chaos and a kind of a decline of morals in society. So I think he's using that as using that as the base by talking about Covent Garden, which is supposed to be this entertainment hub. And when he does that, as many other writers did, you find that Fielding uses the persona of this person. That he uses, of course, this name, pseudonyms, like all the other essayists do. And at the time, because they don't want to come, I mean, finally they all get to know who's this person, and they are all moving around in the same circle, but they take the persona of different characters often. So for instance, Fielding takes the persona of Sir Alexander Cancer. Now this particular character appears in a restoration comedy called The Rehearsal that actually parodied John Dryden and John Dryden's characters. So he takes this person as his, the name that he wants, the pseudonym. Fielding takes him as the pseudonym, takes this name as a pseudonym. Now to suggest that he also means to parody, and parody who, of course, will you'll see once we go to the text. Now in Fielding's papers, then the Draw Cancer appears as, he's called the censor of Great Britain. He's called the judge and the censor of Great Britain. So in a way, suggesting that you are going to make people look critically at themselves, and that is, I think, the purpose of his journal, the purpose of the Covent Garden journal. So this is how I'd like to put that in the context of the 1740s, because the journal begins in 1752, and by then he has already seen this kind of moral decline, and he wants to focus on bringing people back, correcting the disorders of the age, if you like.
Is it 52 or 42?
52,
because he dies, when does he die?
54.
54, okay.
Yeah. So this is, in 1752 he starts publishing this, and this goes on till 1753, and he passes in 1754. So, and this is when he has already written the novels, right? Both the novels have already been written in the 1740s. So what I'm suggesting is that there is a kind of temperance that has occurred. Now Fielding, of course, also wrote plays, till they were, shut down by the Licensing Act, the Theatre Licensing Act, etc., that was put in place. So I think he has moved from one genre to the other. He's written over a dozen plays for theatre, and till he was, they were censored by the authorities, and there was a Licensing Act. It is then that he moved towards fiction and essay writing. So, and finally towards the end of his life, he moved towards the English essay.
Isn't that ironical that a person who wants to correct the world is being chased by the authorities for action to be taken against him?
But that was in his early career, right? We are talking about 1737. The Theatre Licensing Act came out in 1737, restricting all kind of artistic freedom, and that was imposed by Robert Walpole. So by that his dramatic career as a dramatist came to an end when the Drury Lane Theatre was shut down. So this is 1737.
So you find new ways of asserting himself.
So 1730s he spent writing these the drama. Then 1740s also he started writing these essays till, and even around the Jacobite Rebellion of 1745 or so. This is also the time when he's writing the novels, both the novels. And by 1750 he has moved, he's become this justice, as I told you, and 1752 is when he decides to move in the direction of writing the humorous essays, or what you call the light-hearted English essays, the periodical essays that are published in the Covent Garden journal. So this is the timeline, really speaking.
So friends, in this part of the essay, Dr. Bajaj has talked about the evolution of the essay in the hands of Henry Fielding, and his career is illustrious. He starts from one point and goes to the other. So he has one extreme in the beginning, and the other extreme, if it can be so called, at the end of his career. And the journey is not just long; it's also full of problems, full of hurdles on the way, and he crosses them successfully. So I'll put questions regarding that in the second part of the discussion. But the point is very clear that job of the essayist, as Henry Fielding finally envisioned, was the job to make people happy and relaxed. And in fact, when they are happy and relaxed, then they are prone to good ideas also. Maybe those ideas are not as innocent as one might think, but because he had already relaxed the mind of the audience, therefore he could just get away with the criticism that his essays and also his novels, contained at the time. So we will take up these questions in the second part. Until then, one has to wait. Thank you.